Marissa.
And my name is Marissa
And
Ramirez.
this is our muscle movements video for anatomy and physiology.
The purpose of this video is to name all the 17 muscle movements, identify the agonist and antagonist, the plane of the specific movement, and to provide an example of the movement in real life.
The movement name is circumduction. The selected joint is ball and socket. The muscles involved are supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. The antagonist is the deltoid. The antagonist is latissimus dorsi. It is multiplanar, and the real-world example is arm circles. The movement name is abduction. The selected joint is ball and socket. The muscles involved are gluteus medius, gluteus minimus, and tensor fasciae latae. The antagonist is the tensor fasciae latae and gluteus medius. The antagonist is the gluteus maximus. It's on the sagittal plane, and the real-world example is balancing on one foot. The movement name is adduction. The selected joint is the ball and socket joint. The muscles involved are pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi, and teres major. The agonist is the deltoid, and the antagonist is the latissimus dorsi. It is on the sagittal plane, and an example is putting your arms down from the side. The movement name is plantar flexion. The selected joint is the hinge joint. The muscles involved are peroneus longus, gastrocnemius, and soleus. The antagonist is gastrocnemius plantaris, and the antagonist is the tibialis anterior. It goes along the sagittal plane, and the real-world application is tippy-toeing. Go. The movement name is opposition. The selected joint is the interphalangeal joints. The muscles involved are adductor pollicis brevis, lateral flexor pollicis brevis. The agonist is lateral flexor pollicis brevis, and the antagonist is pollicis longus adductor and adductor pollicis. It is multiplanar, and an example is making the OK sign with your fingers. The movement name is medial rotation. The joint involved is the glenohumeral joint. The muscles involved are teres minor, latissimus dorsi, teres major, and anterior deltoid. The agonist is latissimus dorsi, teres minor, and anterior deltoid. The antagonist is posterior deltoid and teres minor. It is on the transverse plane, and the example is putting something in your pocket. The movement name is radial deviation. The joint involved is radiocarpal joint. The muscles involved are flexor capri radialis, extensor capris, and radialis longus. The agonist is flexor capri radialis and extensor capris. The antagonist is the flexor capri ulnaris and extensor capri ulnaris. It is on the frontal plane, and the example is waving. The movement name is dorsiflexion. The joint involved is talocrural joint. The muscles involved are tibialis anterior, fibularis, soleus, and gastrocnemius. The agonist is tibialis anterior, and the antagonist is gastrocnemius and soleus. It is on the sagittal plane, and the example is flexing your feet. The movement name is lateral rotation. The joint involved is the glenohumeral joint. The muscles involved are posterior and anterior deltoids, teres minor and major, and latissimus dorsi. The agonist is posterior deltoid and teres minor. The antagonist is latissimus dorsi, teres major, and anterior deltoid. It is on the transverse plane, and an example is reaching to the side. The movement name is hyperextension. The joint involved is the glenohumeral joint. The muscles involved are latissimus dorsi, teres major, and deltoid. The agonist is deltoid, and the antagonist is latissimus dorsi. It is on the sagittal plane, and an example is the freestyle stroke in swimming. The movement name is pronation. The selected joint is the radioulnar joint. The muscles involved are brachioradialis, pronator teres, pronator quadratus, and biceps supinator. The agonist is the brachioradialis, pronator teres, pronator quadratus, and the antagonist is the biceps supinator. It is on the transverse plane, and the real-life example is Yared's hand trick. The movement name is supination. The selected joint is the radioulnar joint. The muscles involved are biceps supinator, brachioradials, pronator teres, and pronator quadratus. The antagonist is biceps supinator and brachioradials. The antagonist is pronator teres and pronator quadratus. It is on the transverse plane, and the example is flipping your hand. The movement name is eversion. The selected joint is the talocrural joint. The muscles involved are tibialis anterior and tibialis posterior. The agonist is the tibialis posterior and the antagonist is the peroneus longus. It is on the frontal plane and the real-life application is putting your foot outward. The movement name is inversion. The selected joint is the talocrural joint. The muscles involved are tibialis anterior and tibialis posterior. The agonist is tibialis posterior and the antagonist is peroneus longus. It is on the frontal plane and the example is putting your foot inward. The movement name is ulnar deviation. The joint involved is the ulnar carpal joint. The muscles involved are flexor capri ulnaris and extensor capri ulnaris. The agonist is extensor capri ulnaris and the antagonist is the extensor capri radialis brevis and extensor capri radialis longus. It is on the frontal plane and the example is waving. The movement name is flexion. The joint involved is the humeroulnaral joint and the humeroradial joint. The muscle involved is the pectoralis major. The agonist is biceps and the antagonist is triceps. It is on the sagittal plane and the example is picking up a lunchbox. The movement name is extension. The joint involved is the glenohumeral joint. The muscle involved is the biceps brachii. The agonist is the posterior deltoid and the antagonist is the anterior deltoid. It is on the sagittal plane and the example is putting down a lunchbox.